Alright, so tonight we're going to be doing threaded boxes, and the acrylic resin comes in when you want to thread a box that is softer wood or like a spalted maple. And so what I'm going to do is basically remove some of the wood, and then we're going to pour resin in that area, and then we cut the threads into where that resin is. And so it should use a minimal amount of resin and still accomplish our goal. And then Kurt's got 3 little ones to pass, and so you can see what we're working on. So to start, just a spindle, and then getting ready to part it off. So you've got the bottom on this side and the top here. So this side's the bottom, and what I've done is I've taken about 15, 20 millimeters gap there. And then I also have where I'm actually going to part this off right here in the middle. And then I drop this in about a 1/2 inch. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay.
We don't do millimeters.
Okay, yeah, sorry. It's easier than 30 seconds. So I drop it in about a 1/2 inch. That way I'll have enough stock in the cap to cut threads in that as well. So about a 1/2 inch is what I've found to be good, and that'll leave enough space to where we actually have resin to cut into and still have enough thickness to finish the final shape at the end, right? Okay. So now I'm just gonna part this off because it's already prepped. Yeah, all right. Alright, so now on this side I'm going to cut a groove, parting tool, and this is where the resin will go for the female threads. And I'm just using a parting tool. So I'm going in about 15 millimeters here again for all of you guys.
We'll edit that little piece out. We want our mom to worry.
Alright, so that's it. And this is where we'll get ready to pour some resin in this piece. So, it's not much to see with this piece, so I'm not going to pass it around. So for the bottom, I use masking tape to tape around, and this will be like the mold to cast. And I use rubber bands just to make sure that the resin doesn't seep out the bottom. So I'll show you that. So just a rubber band. And then I'll run tape around it. It's just duct tape, nothing fancy. Clear packing tape works as well. It's kind of up to you what you have at the shop. And so about 1/4 inch down, just making sure that it all runs around. Millimeters? What did you want?
How many millimeters?
Yeah, you know, as much as you want, about 6.5.
There you go.
And so I'm just wrapping it around, trying to keep it an even width. Sometimes I put a pencil mark if I remember, and follow the pencil mark around. So tape that, And then just try not to smash it in because it'll stick to itself. But then I just move the rubber band up to make sure, just the second layer, to make sure the resin doesn't seep out. I haven't had any leak yet, but you know, it's a possibility. Very technical stuff here, you know. All right, so that's the prep for that. And this one we'll just pour directly into the groove that I cut. So now we're gonna mix some resin. Got my handy dandy assistant, Titus.
All right. Hello.
So we're using East Coast resin, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio mix, resin to the hardener. And so he's got 2 cups here. We just use disposable cups because we don't like to clean up. So on this one, we're just pouring it about 1 inch up. So what, probably about 2 ounces maybe of each, not even. And then he's using Pearl-X pigment. It's just a powdered pigment that Bob has talked about several times. And he's using orange tonight. So he's gonna put them in and mix them. And for this East Coast resin, it says to mix it, it's gonna turn cloudy. As you're mixing, it'll start clouding up, and then once it goes back clear, that's the end of your mix time. And it's about 3 to 7 minutes. Question?
Where did you buy it and where did it come?
So we ordered this one off their direct website from East Coast Resin online, and they shipped it very quickly. For this 1 gallon of each, A and B, it was around $100. But they've got smaller, no, for both. And they've got smaller containers, and it's actually per ounce cheaper than the one you can buy at like Menards. So that's kind of why we use this.
Is it cheaper than Luminite?
Yes, it is cheaper than Illumilite. Yeah, and so just mix it. He put the pigment in early, so he's not gonna know when his mix time is done. But okay. You know, it should work. And then the next thing is the pressure pot. So we'll mix it, and air bubbles get introduced during the mixing. And so to get them out, you can either use a torch and like go over it, and the air bubbles will rise to the top of the resin, or you can use a pressure pot. So tonight we're gonna use the pressure pot. This is a paint pot that we got from Harbor Freight, and Dave picked it up for us. And then Dennis, not this Dennis, but another Dennis, it comes with a T on it, and then the pressure gauge, and so we removed that T and just put the pressure gauge directly onto the pot, and then we removed the other inlet that they had and just put a valve so we can control the air going in and then lock it in when we reach the pressure we want. And in here we've got 2 wine stoppers that Titus poured the other day, so we're going to pass those around. And if someone wants to break them out of the mold, feel free.
And the cups are disposable.
They sure are.
Yes, they are disposable. And then this is our resin catcher that we use. It's a butter cookie can. So we ate the cookies first, and then we used it. And the reason we use it, the bottom of the pressure pot is concave. So we use this to kind of give us a flat bottom, and it just so happened to fit. And then also, in case resin leaks, as Titus's did last time he poured, it's stuck in here instead of getting into our paint pot. So again, no cleanup. Pass that around. And so when we pour resin, sometimes we use like a cup as a mold. Titus likes to take the piece of wood and wrap it with a plastic of some sort or tape and kind of set exactly where he wants the resin. That's kind of how he did his other eccentric pieces that he's been working on. And so that's kind of the setup for his, but that one leaked out a little bit.
And then I also like to wrap it because after that, whether it's foil or plastic, I could just turn it off. But for Nicole, she has to peel out her cast and her mold. And so I find it's easier. I think I'm done.
Okay.
There's something flat.
What?
Something flat to put in there.
Oh.
Look at this.
Nope.
Alright. Can they see? Everyone can see? Is it pour?
I don't have anything for you.
Find something. Find a piece of wood.
It should sit flat.
How long does it take to dry?
So when the directions, they tell you the directions for a floor, if you're using this on a floor. So they say the first coat should be about 4 hours. And then, you know, they tell you to do a thicker coat. And then they say about 4 hours as well. We usually leave it in the pressure pot for 4 hours. And then after that, we've taken it out. But I usually don't turn it until the following day. So about 24 hours.
You have way too much resin.
Yeah.
It's a little extra.
I put it in the. Right.
And then this is our leftover resin. So there's layers of different colors.
So you can turn
So
that.
one day we'll break it out and turn it.
I just turn the glass off.
Pretty heavy.
Alright.
Yeah.
No, he's a torch, yeah.
So now Titus has a little torch. It's not super necessary that he does that because we're gonna put it in the paint pot. But it's just a small, like a lighter that's a torch. So if you don't want to do big stuff, it's a nice little one.
Yeah.
And sometimes I use Play-Doh on the bottom to help stabilize my pieces if they're small. So just a little ball of that on the bottom.
There it is. Then we also numbered these so that we have the same orientation every time.
And the orientation only matters because it's a Harbor Freight product. So the gasket doesn't seal very well in all directions. So we found one that works and that holds our pressure at about 49 psi. So we marked it and we use that one every time.
Okay, the wrench.
And then Hector, another member here, he had one of these, so we used his a couple times, and then we did this, and he runs his pressure around 40 psi as well, or 50. The maximum allowable working pressure for this is 60 psi, but then the range that they tell you to work is also 60, so we try to stay below 60 because we don't trust it.
Use it for paint, and I'll use 6.
That should be good.
One atmosphere is 32. So you're only going
Chicken.
Struggling?
Nope.
Yeah. Wear the face shield.
Exactly. Safety first.
If I can see it from here, don't look. I'll tell you when it gets there. 30.
About
40.
50 right now.
Yeah, just above 50, and then it'll settle around 49.
How much was that?
The pressure pot's about $80, and then you need one valve additional to what it comes with.
The
Because it
valve.
comes with a gauge.
Yeah, with the valve with the petcock on it.
Yeah, a valve, yeah.
When you use those for paint,
Mhm.
you only put it in 6 pounds.
Yeah,
You're losing pressure.
So that's what
it'll
they're
drop in
designed for.
stable around 49
6 pounds?
6.
or 48.
And use
That's a
it 8
long
hours
way
Yeah.
a
from
day.
50. A long way from 50. A long way from 50.
And then I brought this. So this is from the Christmas ornaments that I did a couple months ago. This is the start of it. And then we drop it in something like this and pour the resin around it. So I'll pass that around for people who want to see that.
How do you turn it then?
Inside and out.
No, I mean, how do you grasp it with the leg?
Oh, then we put it between centers and cut a tenon.
Okay.
And then chuck it up. Alright, so now I'm going to just hollow out this top piece. And the goal for hollowing this is to get it deeper than 15 millimeters. And then also making sure your sides are parallel to or perpendicular to the chuck, however you want to think about that, so that your threads are straight. I'm using a scraper tonight.
So this is made up of diamond-shaped long pieces.
Yes.
Yeah, and then they're all glued together in this form.
Yeah. Cut on a table saw with a jig.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Titus. Thanks so much.
So when you turn that, you turn it like you're doing a hollow core.
Very good job,
something.
Deanna.
So you shape the outside and then drill a hole and
You hollow
hollow
it
it
out.
out. Yeah.
That's cured sufficiently already.
Yeah. This is a next piece, different piece.
Oh, yeah. Huh?
This was prepped, you know.
All right.
I
I
brought
feel
it down
better
from up there.
Yeah, I feel better.
Yeah.
You're staying inside the resin.
Right now, but I'll go past it eventually. So now I'm going to use a recess cutter. It's a tool that comes with the Sorby hand threading tools, and it's pretty much a scraper, and it's just got this little inset, so that'll tell me exactly how deep the recess needs to be. It's about 4 millimeters. Yep. And so, see the angle on the side there, back. So I'll be cutting with this side here, and then a little bit with the top.
tools give you again?
The advantages, as far as, well, I haven't started the recess yet, but it'll cut the recess exactly the size I need it, which will be this side here. This little inset here, that'll be the recess depth. And then it cuts perpendicular pretty easily, so I can kind of push it and it'll cut against the side and the front. If that makes any sense. Yes, no?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the recess will come as space when I have the male threads. Once they get past the actual threads, they need to go somewhere. They can't just stop right at the top. And also when I'm cutting with the jig, the cutter head has about 5 millimeters that it needs to have depth so that you can remove the cutter head. And based on the angle of it, you have to have some excess space. Okay.
Above the threads, right?
Yes, past the threads.
If that's the lid, above the threads.
Yeah.
Would that be clearance?
Yes, cutting clearance, cutting a recess, same thing. All right, now I'm going to check my depth. From experiments, it seems as though you need at least 10 millimeters of threads to use this threader and get a decent closure. And so I'm at 10, so I'm going to straighten out my side because I have some chip out here. And as far as cutting resin, I find it best to use sort of a scraping cut. Whether that be with a bowl gouge, shear scraping, or cutters like these. It's kind of push cutting, like with a bowl gouge, wasn't the most fun for me because it does chip out. So you want to kind of go into it slowly because it will grab and chip out.
Titus, did you put the pencil?
Alright, so that's the recess. A little rougher than I practiced, but that's the recess in there. So it's set back away from where I just cut, if that makes sense. And now I'm going to cut a chamfer, so it's probably about a 45-degree angle on the very beginning here of my tenon, and that's to help when you start threading a box. That's to make sure that the threads grab and catch. So I'm going to cut a small chamfer there, and I'm going to use the same tool right here on the edge.
Is that a new grain or side grain?
It's resin.
Does it
This would normally be end grain.
Good one.
It would normally be end grain if you're cutting a spindled box, but I have cut threads in like side grain, and it does work. Especially with the jig, it makes it pretty easy.
Right.
So I'm gonna clean that up a little more. Alright, so that's it. Now it's ready to start threading. And once you turn the top or the bottom, you don't want to take it out of the chuck. You want to leave it in the chuck. So now I'm going to transfer the chuck over here. Alright.
What a brother. You're welcome again.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much. All right. Now, this is the Easy Threader by Chefware, and it comes with this, and it can be adapted to any lathe, because there's 2 posts that it comes with, so a longer and a shorter one. And then this ring has a little Allen wrench, and so you can loosen that and adjust it to the height of your lathe. So that's part of how it's adaptable to each lathe. And so when you're setting it up, you would bring it over here and line it up to where it's even and lock in the Allen. And then this swivel part comes in handy when you're checking the threads with the lid, once you get ready to cut the other side. So I'm just gonna put the chuck on. And it does come with different, you can buy different size threads. And you just get a different rod, and then you take off the handle and this adapter here, and you put your different size thread rod through this same piece. So today this is 16 threads per inch that we're working with.
Plug me back in. Stepped on the cord. Some duct tape.
And so just from setting up a couple, trying not to bottom out or go to the end of these threads, I put it normally in the middle, or close enough, middle of that one and this one. So you've got
Camera to the other side.
the thread, the threads are halfway between, and then this one adjusts forward and backwards, this knob here. And then the cutter head is in that red one, if you can pass that around. It's a double angle cutter head, so you can see exactly what it looks like. It kind of comes to a point like this. And we're using it today with a collet chuck, or a collet, and then the all thread back here that's holding it in place. But you can use it with a collet chuck. Done that too. So now to line it up, you want this perpendicular to your bed. So what I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to use the cutter head. I'm going to go to the inside, and then I'm going to slowly back it out so that it's barely touching, and then that'll let me know if I'm perpendicular or not. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going to tighten this because it's a little loose. Okay.
Yeah, pretty
There's a little theme music there, right?
So I don't know what you guys can see, but
See pretty good.
there's some little lines in there, so it's not hitting everywhere, so I'm going to adjust it again to try to get it to hit a little bit better.
You saying I should dig more into it?
Yeah, I want it to kind of touch all the way around, and so that's what I'm looking for.
What? Is it good?
So now it pretty much dragged along the entire surface. And so for different size threads per inch, they tell you a gauge about how much to turn the wheel to get your depth for the cut. And so for 16 threads per inch, it's a ½ inch turn. So that's going to be counterclockwise this time so that it brings it towards me and the cutter head. And then you just got to make sure all these things are tight because they do kind of move it up slightly as it tightens. And so now I'm going to make the first cut, and it should just be a single pass. So with woods, they say on softer woods, you might want to do it in 2 passes. Do the first pass lightly, flood it with CA glue, thin CA, and then do the second pass so the CA can help strengthen the wood. But for the resin, I found that you can normally do the full cut, which is going to be a half turn, and it's about 40 thousandths, I think, for anybody that wants to know those numbers. The thousandths of an inch, yes. So yeah, I'm gonna do my half turn. I think I just did that. And then I'm gonna get ready to cut. Yeah, okay. So the cutter, they say run at 2,500 RPMs. And so it's pretty fast. And then they say smooth and slowly on rotating this. And this is gonna be the threads, right? And the cutter head's stationary. So yeah, I'm gonna start cutting the threads.
I wouldn't believe that.
Zoom in.
Tachometer's a little low.
We'll go with that. We'll just go with that. Right.
You're at 1,200.
1,200.
That's as fast as I go on that.
That's it.
Zoom in.
So that's pretty much the cut in, and I always stop it and then move it away from the cutter head a full turn, back it out, and then that way I don't drag across threads. And I do a full turn so I can remember how much to go back. And the other thing, you want to make sure you have that recess, because if you don't and you don't stop turning, then the cutter head will hit the bottom and just tear it up. Seen that happen before. Little wire brush here just to get rid of some of this stuff. And on the female threads, this is the first threads you cut, so you just have to look at the threads to see if they're good. And if you need to make a second pass on the cut, do that, because you don't have anything to match it up to yet. So I'm actually going to do one more cut because it doesn't look very deep. Alright. So I'm going to go back my turn and then go a quarter of a turn instead of a half this time, because I don't think I need a full pass.
Instead of pulling it all the way out and starting in a second time,
Yes.
can you, once you're all the way in, just give it a little crank and then back it out?
You can. I would suggest putting it in reverse, because sometimes when you're going the other direction, I think it's because of the cutter head, it doesn't always cut as well. And then if you're cutting these in wood, sometimes it tears out more going if you don't put it in reverse. If that makes any sense. All right. Some air. Alright, so I'll pass that around. Let me take a measurement first.
And the resin, because it works better than wood for threads, right?
Well, for softer woods like that
Yeah.
spalted maple, there's really no
Yeah,
way
really
you'd be
no
able
way.
to cut threads in that.
Well, it gives you a better surface no matter what.
Yeah, it does.
Some woods don't take threads very nicely.
So they give you measurements again. It's double the cut depth. So it's going to be 40 thousandths times 2, so 80 thousandths that I'm going to be adding. So I'm measuring my female threads, and then I'm going to add 80 thousandths to this measurement.
Is there any further polishing or anything on these threads that has to be done?
Sometimes I put a little bit of paste wax.
Okay, yeah, smooth it out.
Just the car wax, nothing special, Brazilian. But that I find I need more with wood than with the resin threads. So now that I have my new measurement, this will be for my female or male side. And so I'm going to cut the tenon that down to this size, and then I will thread it. The only thing with the threading that's a little complicated is this back and forth. If you've only got one lathe, then you have to take this cutter head out each time. So I thank the gentleman for setting up both of them over here. Quite nice.
I don't want to hear any more Bondo jokes.
Nice try.
So this is pretty precise then, to get it to that size.
Yeah, we hope so. And it matters if you cut it parallel or not. That also makes a pretty big difference. Figured that out a couple times.
Keep passing it back.
And for this part, I'm just going to use a parting tool. Usually works for me.
Do you want to? What is it? Survey. Oh.
So I'm just basically cutting a tenon that's to the size that I need. So I start by cutting just a little bit so I can check my size. It does sort of hurt when it spins around, so sometimes you just clear it off. And then this is so on some of the pieces that went around at the beginning, you saw a thin layer of resin. That's because I poured deeper than I cut the threads. So I basically just left this little sliver of resin here instead of cutting all the way down. So if you want to do that on purpose, you can leave more or less. And again, looking for 10 millimeters depth is a good amount of threads. So I am just about there. And same thing on this side, you cut a recess or clearance, and then on the top you cut a chamfer as well. So I'm going to do that too. Check these size. So big. Now on this measurement, you do want to get it pretty much exactly what the calipers say. You don't want to have any heaviness, or if you're too small, then you kind of got to start over. But you don't want to have it heavy, because then when you cut, you'll end up having to take more passes, and the more passes you get after you get a certain depth, you start ripping out threads just kind of based on the shape of the cutter, and it just doesn't work very well. So I really suggest trying to take the time at this point and get it exactly where it needs to be.
Yeah, the threads work, but they're cut deep from one side to the other. Have you used it? Have you used it? You can't go wrong.
So I went ahead and cut the recess. This is going to be a small set of threads. And it's not quite down to my thickness yet.
Where's the recess?
So the recess for this one, again, it's at the bottom here. And I usually just do the width of the parting tool, so it's pretty easy. Again, it's about 4 millimeters.
Thanks.
And I've got a little, it's not quite parallel here either, so I'm going to straighten that out as I go down. Yeah. Hopefully I'm there.
But a quarter inch pedant with a little easier than using a parting tool. Speaking of which,
Alright, hopefully I'm there. Hopefully I'm there. Alright, so that's my cut there.
I got one that's burned out, I figured I might know a place to get a new one.
So I already sort of cut a chamfer on it, and the recess is in, so now we're ready to go back over here.
Double-headed blade makes life a little bit longer.
And this light you see here is courtesy of Woodworking Wonders, Pastor Joe. So if anyone wanted to know where that came from, that's where it came from. Alright, so again, the setup is to get this perpendicular. And run it along the threads.
So the wife says to the husband, do I look fat? And the husband says, do I look stupid? No, don't love you there.
So I got score lines on the bottom half but not on the top. So that either means I cut the tenon crooked or it's not lined up. So we're going to go with it's not lined up. And so I just adjusted this a little bit and slightly moved it over to hopefully get straight threads. So we're going to see.
And the jig that the thing is mounted on, that's lateral movement. Did you do it?
Forward and backward, yes. Yes. So now I'm getting score lines all the way down, so I think we're good.
You aren't sure if you got it right or not.
Okay.
That's not enough, that's good.
All right, so I'm just gonna cut, same thing, slow and steady. And a half turn cut. So again, I'm backing it off of the cutter, full turn. And this is a little brass brush. Just kind of clean up the threads. Did the top come back around? Thank you very much. Moment of truth.
Yeah, we switched in the meantime.
Where did the tape go? So I'm gonna swivel this out of the way so I can check it. So I'm just mark it with a piece of tape so I can try to come back to the same place. Ultimately, you have to line the threads up, but this helps a little sometimes. So,
Should it not fit?
yeah, should it not fit? Exactly. Alright. Well, can you guys see on the camera? So we'll see if it fits. Should it not fit? So it's just a little bit too big. It's spinning, but it's not catching. So I'm going to take another cut and hopefully it'll fit. And so like I said, the easiest way to make sure you're back in the threads is to put it in the threads, tighten it. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. Put it in the threads, tighten it. But before I do that, I had backed it off one turn, so I'm going to put it back on one turn, which would be this way. Alright, so I'm back in my threads. So now I'm going to take another quarter cut of a turn. Me too.
Can't take this to spades.
Alright, moment of truth. Oh, this is not a good demo.
That was a slap in the face. It looks like it's gonna fit.
Nope, not quite.
Still too big?
On a hammer?
Yeah. Yeah, at some point. At some point a hammer would work. So at this point we'll pass around the ones that I completed successfully.
Takes a lot of trial and error.
Well, some days.
Is it possible to take another cut, or
We will only show the
Possible
one
to
that
what?
works.
is it possible to take another cut?
Yes, it is.
Or you have to limit what you can do?
No, I can take another cut, and I will. At this point, sometimes if the threads start coming to a point and you want to take another cut, I hand sand it down so that the points aren't there because those will grab and rip out. But on this resin, I don't think that should be an issue, so I'm just going to take another cut.
I mean, the peaks of the threads.
Yeah, the peaks of the
They get
threads.
too.
As they get narrow, you want to hand sand that down if you're going to take another cut. Because as you start taking that other cut, it just starts, the points start grabbing and ripping out. Yeah. Yep.
This gets you really good at readjusting, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So the fitting issue is not because of, or is it because the threads aren't deep enough, or the diameter is not?
The diameter is not quite correct. Yeah.
So by doing what you're doing, that's going to reduce the diameter as well as increase the depth of the thread?
Yeah.
So Nicole, you think doing it on the wood versus doing it on the resin, that you might have to adjust it just a hair more for the resin because it's so hard?
As far as the cut depth, possibly, yeah. But on Friday when I cut, it was perfect.
So did
I don't know, half turn worked.
Must
But
be
yeah.
delayed.
It's the same kind though.
Cameraman.
I'm trying to give you some slack, come on.
Okay, just making sure I'm lined up.
Can we ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
How much does the threading setup cost?
This one's about 400, a little over 400, almost 5.
And it's the better one?
No,
No. Oh.
the other one's better because you don't have to line it up. It fits in the bedways,
Okay.
so it's already perpendicular and takes out a lot of the guesswork.
And it costs more?
$750.
So what version or model do you have there, and what's the other one you're talking about?
This is the chefware, and the other one is a Baxter threader. Yeah, that one. And the Baxter threaders are made specific for a lathe, so you have to give them your model, your length, your height, size, everything.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's the nice one.
it's almost a dental tool.
I mean, it's got gauges on here for depth and. It's a beautifully machined piece. Well done.
Yeah, I think I messed that up.
Cool.
Yeah, you got some different plates in here.
Well, we're going back and see, that's what.
That's why it has to be specific to lathe because of this.
Yeah, right.
And then the height, of course.
So the other ones, that's like.
Almost. Let me see.
Almost.
The top.